Hello and welcome to One on One. I'm Vernon Ramazan. Even though it's called One on One, every now and then we make an exception. I can't think of a better reason to make an exception than my two guests today, mother and daughter Michele Jodhan and Anya, Ayoung, Chee, both at Tall Man Foundation. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
I get to shake two sets of hands.
Such a privilege.
I'm like Michele and Kit, but it's too far. You've been having your viewing party for Under the Gun, which is your current show, which sort of fills in for Project Runway, I guess, this time around, and you're one of the mentors. And I think both of you came up to me individually and said, Vern, you should interview both of us together.
Isn't that strange?
It was just weird coincidence within minutes of each other.
Strange. It happens a lot.
And I thought, what a brilliant idea. And I can't say no to either one of you. So.
Slightly narcissistic, if not brilliant.
Yes, I mean, there is that. And on my part too, because I love both of you so much. But I wanted to discuss some things because I think it's interesting, the dynamic between the two of you and the rest of the family as well. Because, Michele, you've been working, helping people for a long time. You've been a businesswoman. Anya, you've gone through a lot of celebrity over the last few years. You're a spokesperson for brands and things. You're your own brand now. And it seems family is an important part of this for both of you. I mean, even Tall Man came out of a family experience, didn't it?
Absolutely.
How important is family to each of you?
Well, you start.
Me?
Yeah, it's good to hear what you think. First.
Oh gosh, I say in any interview that I'm asked anything about my family, or even what's the foundation of everything that I do, is that it begins with us. My brothers especially, of course my parents I owe everything to, but my brothers are my life, they're everything that motivates me, they're everything that I live for. And even though we of course have everyday family dynamics of drama and whatever, like that, I think especially after Pilar died, one of our brothers, we became whose
name you have tattooed on your wrist.
Very, very conscious of what really is important to us. And I think between the boys and I, there's nothing that comes before us. And I think that's an amazing way to live our lives, really.
And of course, you have the dynamic of being the only girl.
Yes.
Which makes you ultra special and the first. So.
Well, I don't know about special, but yes. But I think that we were very blessed to have been treated equally across the board, and I've never felt really. It was only the external projection on me that, you must be the princess, and you must be. But I never felt like that. I didn't feel less than that, but I never felt like I was particularly more important in any way ever.
Was that important for you, Michele, to bring up all the kids equally?
Quite the opposite, actually. I would say that I was very influenced into sort of 70s feminism, that old movement when I went to university in the 70s into Canada. And
Thus you are still Michele Jodhan.
And
right.
So testimony to that. And I really had a very strong sense of, I guess, evenness in terms of raising children, raising young people to be who they were, irrespective of gender. So, but there was almost an overcompensating, that Anya was to be treated. That was my feminist side, and she was the eldest. And at one point, she was so willing and so competent, even as a young girl, that at one point it was becoming me, my assistant Anya, and our 5 sons. And I said, this has to end. Because she was just playing naturally into that role, partly I was a career mother at that point, and partly because she was just, doing her own role playing. And I was, that for her. And so I think at one point I really tried to overcompensate for that, so that she would not take on that role unless she chose it. But yes, a little bit of all of that. But what is interesting, one of the things that interests me, what Anya said about what's happened with us in terms of our dynamic, and it's been sort of just curious to me particularly over the last couple of weeks, once particularly when Anya is here, because we're all living at home still in versions and rhythms. Sometimes there are 2 people in terms of the next generation, the children, and sometimes there's a whole lineup, because no one no one is married, let's start with that, and therefore no one is necessarily, Anya lives in New York, but when she's in Trinidad, she lives in Trinidad with us, and that's her base, and so forth, and so, with all the different versions. But when we're all together, we've also produced all these entrepreneurs. So we are all also working out of a very common space. So yesterday, this is not to overreach things. then. But one of the things I said to Anya yesterday is, so Anya's business then gets run from home. Her father always has a business that run from home. My business life that is now sort of starting again is run from home, and this goes on with all of that. And I said, and you know, I just noticed that there's this dynamic between family life and home, and it's all happening in this house, which you know. And she said, yes, it's the factory. It's like Andy Warhol's factory. And you know, I actually had to go online and go back to the characteristics of what defined the factory, because
A lot of insanity.
It's not quite as wild, I don't think. I hope not.
no, I think, oh God, I'd like to think minus some of the
Right, yeah,
aspects.
some of the more
But the
out there,
concept of family, the family dynamic, a certain individual expression on each of our parts, yet a certain unification and a thread that runs through all of us, and there's a relation running through every one of the businesses that are related. It's just quite extraordinary. I don't know, I'm still trying to figure out how it really all happened, but it's there.
Is there a danger to that, you think? I mean, having the family and all the individual businesses all mixed up together so that everything is happening in one place, in one home. So there's no separation for you if you try to get away from
Oh, we always
Anya the brand
always trying to
or
get
Michele
away.
the brand. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
There's a lot of running for your life.
it's funny, but I try to be very objective when I'm involving my brother's businesses in my own. For instance, my brother Eve produces or co-produces my fets, as well as Fashion Rocks, which is an event that's becoming annual somewhat. One of my brothers has a social media company. It just so happens it's perfect for, like, you know, things when I have to run. But I have to be very objective about it, and vice versa. You know, they're not gonna instantly call on me to do something that I'm apt at, but may not be the perfect fit for. So it's hard to be objective and not sort of operate from a standpoint of nepotism, just because, well, they're in the next bedroom, so they're much easier.
It's also laziness. I mean, yeah.
But I mean, of course, it's wonderful at the same time to support each other and to be able to work symbiotically. And we just also happen to be entrepreneurs in the creative industries as well. Perhaps more in the new age creative industries like social media and music production and DJing. And one brother's a rapper, and, like, you know, all of this. More, not necessarily the traditional art forms, but we really have an incredible kind of symbiosis, what do you call it?
And symbiosis, but also synergy.
Synergy
So
is the best way, yeah.
sometimes even though it's not a deliberate engagement of the other person for a specific contractual purpose, it's also the conversation. It's also just the energy of and I mean, there's so many times that Anya's a tremendous resource to me, and the boys, and then I like to think too, vice versa. You know, I was going to start charging for some of my resources, you know, just by virtue of experience. I have, like,
How do
all
you bring
these
that
people.
up over the breakfast table?
Yeah. Mom, who do you
After
call
an
for
hour
this?
of chatting, oh, that will be $500.
Oh, who do you call for this? Who do you call for that? So I think there is also that shared synergy. Yeah, that synergy.
And you must feel, even though you try to be sort of non-gender specific in how you raise the kids, you must feel a special bond with Anya because she was the first,
Well,
and a woman would naturally project onto the first female
Absolutely.
child.
I mean, there is we spent time as a family in Canada right after the kidnapping in 2003. We spent 2 years, and Anya was at university in New York. But the 5 boys, and Willie and I were together, my husband and I, and there were these 6 men and me living in this apartment in Toronto. 2 of the boys were at university then, the others were in high school. And so that's how we all ended up. And it was really a change in dynamic. And it's when I started to recognize more than ever the role Anya played in my life, in the relationship with her father and I, in the relationship with her brothers. The whole dynamic shifted. And it became it was this, well, of course, everything that goes with it. It was a male-oriented household in which I became a total minority. Somehow there was solidarity, she and I. So, yeah, absolutely.
It was always mom and I and the boys.
Right.
Yeah.
And the boys, including my dad.
But do you have almost like a maternal sort of attitude towards your brothers?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as mom said, for the majority of my childhood and adolescent life, I was second mother, much to the dismay of my poor brothers, because I'm very bossy. And I would go around sort of...
Use the word assertive, Anya.
Well, I now, you know, oh gosh, what's this woman's name? Who's
I saw
Cheryl
posted.
Sanford? Yeah, Sanford, is that her name?
Yes, I think so.
Of Facebook
Yeah.
fame. she said that, you know, all girls who are told their bosses should be told that they're leaders. And I take that very much to heart, because that's very much the kind of person that I am. And had to tone it down with my brothers, because at 16 I realized I didn't have brothers who were friends. I had brothers who were my, you know, children. And it didn't work really. And I missed having them as siblings. And so I really switched maybe a little too far in the direction of no longer being, I didn't want to take on the role of being the example that had to be set. Because that's what I was all through my academic life.
As well, if you're younger, yeah.
It was. And I took it on, and nobody gave it to me. In fact, as Mom said, she was always trying to take it away from me. Always looking after them, always running behind them, always trying to make sure that they stood in line. You know, they behaved and lived that example, so that nobody could point fingers at me, which became a very exhausting place to be. Because then I never gave myself any room to make mistakes. And I think when I switched eventually to knowing that it was okay to be human, and that therefore opened up a space for me to be friends with them, now we have a much better relationship, much more organic, much more and more mutually respectful. In a sense that I think when they started seeing the humanness of me is when they actually started paying attention, and they were more willing to take my heed, you know, and I think it was a big lesson for me at that time, and still.
And one of the interesting things tonight, I think I mentioned it to you the last week or the week before, was that, I mean, you've been a well-known woman in Trinidad and Tobago for quite a while for the good work that you do and for being an entrepreneur, and all of a sudden, after Project Runway, you became Anya's mother. You weren't Michele Jodhan. No. And that must take a bit of getting used to.
Absolutely.
And
I mean,
I'm sure you must rebel against it to some extent. I know.
It's not easy to be eclipsed. And
you're not easy to eclipse, frankly.
No,
so, I mean, it took quite the
that is ludicrous, really.
No, but I'm saying that and I mean it and don't mean it, you know. To go back though to what you were saying and then to continue, one of the things that is unique about my relationship with Anya is she's the closest in age to me. So she's being the eldest. We're only, okay, I'll go ahead and say we're 25 years apart, 26 years. So there's a certain...
People are checking Anya's age.
I know, and now so I'm like gone through. So there is also that, because we also have a lanyard, and I was 40 when I had Will. And there is also the difference of being the mother of mother at 26 and mother at 40, and all life experience. So we've sort of also grown together in a certain way, and I think that has also fed and influenced and shaped our relationship. But in terms of Anya eclipsing me, yes, well, you know, I had some of that in my earlier life, because I had a celebrity sister, in the sense that Laurie, my sister, was a dancer, or is a dancer, was here, became very, very, you know, we danced together, and I was only 15 months older than her. But by 12, she was already the star. And by 16, she was the star. And I already had become Laurie's sister. So I've had a lot of experience.
You've had practice in the area.
Practice, more than you think. But I mean, having said that, that's the real egotistical sort of thing. Having said that, there's nothing greater for a parent than to see their own child flourish. And you are you're happy to be diminished for if it is that's how it's perceived, if a child is flourishing. I mean, you'll do pretty much anything as a parent. There is something in the dynamic. But it's because of the things we said earlier. I think what has happened is Anya's flourishing has allowed me to flourish. And I maybe feel a little eclipsed, you know, when nobody even remembers that my name is Michele. But so, okay, that's as I say, human. But really and truly, she has actually pushed me into becoming more of who I thought I was, could have been, and really was eclipsed in the years of being a career mother. And I really think, right, this stage of my life, I've never been more poised to be more of who I am. And a lot of that is Anya.
Because in fact, I mean, now at this stage in your life, you're doing quite a few things. I mean, you've got the Tall Man Foundation, which is, of course, a passion for the whole family. You're on television as well, doing your Christian meditation on, I can't remember the cable, was it 10?
I wonder why you could.
I just have a bad memory, that's why.
It's Channel 10.
Channel 10.
Which used to be designated EWTN.
Right.
EWTN has shifted, and it's Trinity TV.
So you're involved in that, and you're also entering the dramatic world as well.
Well, from a executive
She
producer.
lives in the dramatic world.
Well, yes, like you mentioned, the household is
Yes, household
quiet
drama.
place, yeah.
Yes, executive producer in that sense, yeah. Of a
So,
play.
you mentioned the fact that you sort of are living more now and you share things with the family and the joys, but I mean, there have been some horrible tragedies in your family as well. Kidnapping, losing Pilar, the problems you had with that media exposure that was unwanted, unnecessary, and really traumatized you and I gather the family. Do those things bring you closer together, or do they cause rifts within the family? Or even just between the two of you?
I would say they do both.
Yeah.
You know, nothing does really all of one thing. I mean, one thing only. They do both. They destroy you, and they rebuild you. There is destructiveness and destruction, and there's potential renewal. It's done both. It's played every havoc that anyone could potentially imagine on every level. Now, what we are grateful for, I think, is that we had the foundation and the framework to cope with and to live through. I'd have to say, because it played itself out, but to live through the negative fallout, the individual journeys, because it's an individual and collective process. So the dynamic is very complex. But to allow every individual to walk each of those that you mentioned, roads, and of course most particular the loss of Pilar, and so the framework was, I think, strong enough, if that's the right word, to hold everyone's individual collapse and journey, and the whole, and then to be resilient enough to allow us to be renewed. And that, because of, as you said, Vernon, they were not only these intense experiences, but they were so close to each other, and that they were literally back to back.
Right.
So it was as if we were being flung around, and every time we thought, okay, well, we've taken the hit. You know, to be very honest, after the kidnapping, don't ask me where I got this concept, but I guess it was a form of coping, and it was also just, whatever. I just thought, okay, we've done our part personally, we've done our part in the society, we've taken our blows, that's it. Now we regroup and we move forward. Only for...
If only we knew.
Yeah, and that was 2003. In 2007, we lost Pilar. When we lost Pilar, I said, you've got to be joking. You know, no, I mean, we cannot have lived through practically losing a child, coming 11 days into it, really coming that close to losing him, getting him back only 4 years later to actually lose a child, and innocently, you know, a victim of, you know, well, I mean, I'd go this far and say vehicular manslaughter in this country. So it really was an immense setback, not only the personal loss and the depth of that grief, which is perpetual, but then you find renewal somewhere. And then the exposure that went on after the tapes. So,
well, and I remember when I had you on not too long after, I believe, and you were angry, and I was angry for you as well. I hadn't even met Anya at that point, I don't think, about the hypocrisy of our society and how people will just forget every other thing that anybody's ever done and focus on the negative, because that's what we love doing. And I very seldom see you angry, but you were really, really angry.
yeah, it was, I definitely...
And not angry with Anya, I should point out, angry with our society.
Yeah, that's just so.
Maybe a tad.
No, it was complex, but I let Anya speak to the business of negativity and facing that in Trinidad.
Yeah, because I want to ask Anya, because you're obviously pushing brand Anya, because you are a brand now, and you're working on that very hard. So you tend to put on a nice face for everyone. Even people you know, you'll be nice, even if I know, like some of you, I'm sure you want to smack me, but you still smile. When you're dealing with that kind of negativity, how do you not let your feelings show? I know you had to sort of deal with that situation for quite a while afterwards, and I know it may have shaped you to some extent in terms of how you cope now.
Well, I think that every time I have to think about this, I remember how angry I was at a certain point, because I don't want to sound like I'm, you know, some kind of stone that has no feelings, because I did. I was very angry for a while. I was angry at the fact that for some reason I was being persecuted for something that many people do, but to me there was some form of crime, if for want of a better word, in the watching of these things.
Right.
But I got the chance,
releasing it.
I mean, not to mention, but after about a year of that, I realized that I was the one carrying all this pain, and that it was affecting everybody around me. And if you want to go as far as how did these tragedies pull us apart as a family, there was probably about a year that Mom and I had a really hard time being the way we always have been, which is each other's confidants, each other's shoulder, each other's rock. You know, it's really, that year was really hard. And I was already not living at home because I was, at the time that whole thing happened, I was living in an apartment away from home. And that just exacerbated the distance. And that's a very uncommon place for us to be, Mom and I. Far less the boys and I, far less my dad and I, but really everything revolves around our, where we are at, together. And so to say that these things didn't affect us personally, they very much did. And I think it took reckoning with, again, what's really important, who's responsible for the pain. And I guess through many different things, doing different courses, life experience, time, all of that, I realized that I was choosing the pain. I was choosing the anger. I was sitting and ruminating in it by choice, you know, and that I had to let it go by choice. And so I think once I did that, now when I hear about it, when I have to talk about it, when people say things to me, I still get all these Facebook messages and, you know, comments and whatever that come to me from people behind their computer who obviously too scared to come.
It happened fairly recently on Facebook, and I was looking,
yeah,
and
it keeps happening.
I don't have your patience and grace. I just wanted to smack people when I was reading it.
Well, I feel not so much anger. In fact, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel sadness for people who, however many years later, still are carrying that pain along with themselves. I feel disappointment that that is how energy is being spent. I think overall, my life at this point is a continuous effort to feel love in every moment. I'm not super successful at it, but I know that that's my mandate, you know, and I know that if I can do that, and if in every moment I get better and better at that, then I'm really succeeding. And nothing else really is a marker for success for me more than that. And so if I can read comments and I can see that people still have some sort of grouse for something that I did innocently many more years before I was Miss Trinidad and Tobago, many more years before I had any sense about myself. And I can seriously, honestly say that what helped me release a lot of that pain was taking accountability for my role. That I made those tapes, I was in them, I did it by choice, nobody forced me, and I have to pay the consequences, even if it's on a much larger or maybe disproportionate scale than other people may have to.
Yeah, but there's consequences based on you, it was not your intention to have those things
released. No, it wasn't. But I can't be mad at
some people have actually suggested that, which I found. I know at the time, Michele, you had said, why? Anya loves her family. She's not going to release something that's going to do that to the family.
But if someone doesn't know that I do, then I understand why they may assume that I could be that kind of vindictive person. And I've also realized, actually very recently, in a recent interview that I did, that a lot of people don't really know who I am. And I have to take also responsibility for the person that I exude, you know. Maybe this was born from my first experience being publicly known, was being a beauty queen.
Right.
And there's something about being a beauty queen that masks a lot of the real person. I was representing Trinidad and Tobago. I wasn't representing Anya, Ayoung, Chee. And I think that it set the tone for how guarded I was and have been in a public forum. When I'm with you in my home at a viewing party of my show, then I'm me, because there are no cameras and I trust you. And it's the same thing with...
it's great seeing you being you, which I have to admit, it certainly is a nice thing to see, because it's not... The poise isn't always there. You're just being yourself. Yeah.
And I do think, honestly, living in New York has broken down some of that, because New York is a very raw environment to live in. There's no time for airs and graces. It's either this or that, or we have no time for you, you know. And it's kind of a relief, you know, because growing up as one, always feeling I was representing my family, two, going to St. Joseph Convent, which certainly sets up a certain expectation of who, as a convent girl, this is who I am.
Right.
Being a dancer, which meant I was always on stage and always presented a certain kind. I mean, being a ballerina on top of it, I wasn't doing even modern, that is more raw. All of these things set me up for, then being a beauty queen, set me up for, well, this is the expectation of who you are supposed to be. And then when I did that interview, not even less than 2 weeks ago, I was kind of blown away by the fact that maybe not everybody knows that there's a real person under here, you know?
Or maybe we don't want to know
Maybe you
that,
don't want to
that
know.
well-known people or celebrities are real people.
Right.
Because we rather just be able to dehumanize them and tear them down or
That's
build them up as we feel.
absolutely true. And I embrace that, you know? I recognize that I chose this life. I will never deny that I opted for it and that it's easier for the average person, including me. I will never say that if I happen to see something about Kim Kardashian or Miley Cyrus, that words don't come out of my mouth that I actually don't mean. I don't know the person, I don't know what they're dealing with, I don't know the dynamics of their life, but I somehow feel this entitlement to talk about them as though they're sitting right next to me. And I think that's what happens with me. And so I guess what's the long and short of it is I treat myself in the public persona as though it's not me, because it really isn't me. And the person who's being spoken about wherever and comments are being made that are derogatory or hurtful, it's not about me, this person. It's about this construct that I created and that I put out there, and it is what it is.
And you can separate yourself emotionally if you need to. We're out of time for this interview. You both wonderfully, graciously said you'll do a second part if we do it really fast. So we're going to do that. We're going to pretend we're going to go away now and come back again with part 2 right after this. Anya, pleasure having you on. As always, Michele, always
Same
great having you here.
outfits coming up.
Yes, and we'll all be wearing the same outfits. You've been watching One and One. Join us again tomorrow for our second part of this discussion.